statement. We now come to the backbench debate on government support for coalfield communities. It's a very well subscribed debate, so there will be an immediate time limit of 5 minutes for backbench contributions. That, of course, does not apply to the mover of the debate, but I hope he bears that comment in mind. Adam Jogee to move.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and as ever I shall seek to follow your instructions as gently as they were put. I'm grateful for the opportunity to lead this debate this afternoon, and I thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting time. It gives members of this House the opportunity to make the case for the coalfield communities up and down our United Kingdom to get the opportunities, the investment, the focus and the support that they need and deserve. Newcastle-under-Lyme, Madam Deputy Speaker, is nestled within the North Staffordshire coalfield. Our ancient and loyal borough has a rich history intertwined with coal mining. In the early 20th century, our coalfields supported more than 50 pits, employing more than 20,000 men and boys. Newcastle-under-Lyme was home to several notable collieries, including Silverdale Colliery, which is among the last deep mines in the area, and which closed in December 1998. The Pitwheel Monument stands proud as a reminder of the past and gives hope for the future. We also have the mini pit monuments up in Audley in the northern part of my constituency. Just a fortnight ago, Madam Deputy Speaker, I was privileged to have the opportunity to attend the commemorative event to mark the 130th anniversary of the Dig Lake Collier disaster that took place in Bingle End in Newcastle-under-Lyme on the 14th of January 1895. That disaster saw 77 men and boys lose their lives and is commemorated every year. It was a wonderful opportunity to reflect and remember, and I'm very grateful to the Reverend Joy Ventham and the church wardens led by Bob Alcock at Audley Methodist Church for hosting such a brilliant weekend of remembrance featuring the excellent Audley brass band.
Well, Frank, give way.
I will happily give way.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way, congratulate him on getting this really important debate together today. He's reflecting on the historic past of the coalfields, and that's absolutely integral to any of us who represent coalfield communities. But does he agree with me that what people in the coalfields want is not mainly a focus on their past, but actually a government with a sense of ambition for their future? And what we really need to see in the coalfields is that the government's industrial strategy recognises the unique contribution that they can make so that we can focus on that bright future for our coalfields as well as our proud past.
Yeah. I thank my friend from Chesterfield. He actually, during the election campaign, came to support me and saw many of the communities to which I refer, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. It's important we know where we have come from, Madam Deputy Speaker, but it's more important too that we set the path to where we want to go. I will happily give way to the member for Strangford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, first of all, can I congratulate the Honourable Gentleman for Newcastle-upon-Lyme, and he will know through his wife, if nothing else, the strong connections, industrial connections with coal mining at Ballycastle, at Coal Island, which is a giveaway. Some of the rocks are some 330 million years old, but does the Honourable Member agree with me that whilst these issues are devolved, it is crucial that we have a joint UK strategy to protect our coal mining towns and villages across this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the member for Strangford. My wife is a wise and wonderful woman, so I know lots from her. He'll be reassured to know, and I agree that we are one United Kingdom and it requires one approach too. Now, Madam Speaker, at the commemoration to which I referred last month, the Order of Service had a poem from Captain John Williams Roberts, whose grandfather died in the disaster and whose daughter Maisie Fowle was at the memorial with me. Despite suffering a stroke in recent months, she is, I'm pleased to say, on the road to recovery. Madam Speaker, Staffordshire women are made of strong stuff. I should know, I was born to one, and I wish Maisie well with her recovery to full health. It just so happens, can I say, that Maisie is Newcastle-under-Lyme born and bred and is a close friend of my family, and I want to share a small part of that poem with the House. Dig Lake disaster, that bitter day in January, Christmas not long gone. We went to work joking and singing, clogs echoing to mirth. How could we guess early subterranean Niagara sweep lads away? By the nature of its vector, trapped mates without escape. While we struggled in icy water, choked for clear air, agony of heart. Burning in our mind, we were separated forever from loved ones. This mixed group of men not able to see Easter. And it ends with, bequeath our generation acts they knew we could perform, advancing wisdom, better leaders, unselfish goals. Thus take up the human charter, embrace our task. The words of Captain John William Roberts, ACF. What a tribute to the sacrifice of those men and boys who died, to the shared experience of miners right across our United Kingdom, from South Wales to the East Midlands, from Yorkshire to the jewel in our kingdom's crown in North Staffordshire. They worked hard, they powered our economy, they showed what grit, determination, dignity, strength and commitment look like. And we have a responsibility, as my friend from Chesterfield alluded to give back to the communities who gave us, the men and boys, and the strong women right beside them, without whom our country, I'll give way in 1 second, without whom our country would never have developed in the way that it has. I'll give way to my friend from Swansea first, because I'm smart, then I'll give way to the man from Scotland.
Very wise. I congratulate my honourable friend for securing this debate, and I have a growing number of mine worker constituents getting in touch with me whose roles meant that they weren't enrolled in the British Coal Staff superannuation scheme, and I know the same is true for my honourable friend from Merthyr Tydfil and Aberdare. All are understandably disappointed they've not received the same justice as their former colleagues in the mine workers' pension. This inequality is unfair, particularly as almost 5,000 women who worked in the industry were particularly paid less, and they were in the British Coal Superannuation Scheme. Does my honourable friend agree with me that urgent action is needed to bring some parity to this current situation?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm very grateful to my friend from Swansea. I couldn't agree more, and I will touch on that gently, but the fact that she's made that point, I think, speaks to her commitment to standing up for those most in need of a strong voice, and I thank her for that intervention. I'll happily give way to my friend from Scotland.
Thank you, and I do commend the honourable member in securing this debate, and I would say that I agree 100% with the honourable lady for Swansea, because I have many constituents who are in exactly the same position. But the honourable gentleman didn't mention Scotland, which obviously has a proud mining tradition, and communities in my constituency such as Sanquhar, Kirkconnell, Kellerholm, Colburn and the Douglas Valley are communities which often have felt very overlooked. But does he agree with me that often in these communities people are still forward-looking, wanting to make those communities turn round and be regenerated? They haven't given up on them, and the government, both here in London and in Edinburgh, shouldn't either.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm very grateful to my friend from Scotland for making that point. I'm looking forward to working with him and him supporting this government as we seek to do exactly as he said, which is get these communities back on track and in the place and with the support that they need and deserve. Madam Speaker, last Friday I met the widow and 2 of the 5 daughters of the late Jimmy Flynn at the weekly coffee morning at St Giles Church in Newcastle-under-Lyme. I hope one day you'll come and join me there, Madam Speaker. They do a good fry in the morning. Mr Flynn was a miner and not quite an Ulster fry, Jim, but sorry, the honourable member for Strangford, but we look forward to joining you for one of those soon. Mr Flynn was a miner, and over a cuppa they told me about his life, his work, and the fact that their dad and their husband, alongside all those who worked down the pit, worked, and I quote, bloody hard every day. That they did, Madam Deputy Speaker. I can't talk about Newcastle-under-Lyme's mining history without celebrating the fantastic Apedale Heritage Centre based at the site of a former coal mine. And I also want to acknowledge the Apedale Valley Railway, and I very much enjoyed riding on a steam train on a recent visit. Despite the coal mines ceasing to operate, their legacy remain an integral part of my community, our heritage, and the lived experience. That legacy reflects a community built on hard work and industrial prowess, by good people driven by decency, respect, strength, and skill. And I'm proud to honour the memories of those who went before us and to represent their descendants and their ambitions in this place today. My honourable friend from Stoke-on-Trent North has had to head home to meet the workers of Royal Stafford who've had bad news this week, and he's asked me to pay tribute to the Coalfields Regeneration Trust, who've supported a number of community organisations in his constituency. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to pay tribute to my honourable friend from Easington. He's been a steadfast and diligent champion of former miners and coalfield communities up and down our United Kingdom. It's been a pleasure working with him and Sophie Jackson in his office, and my team too, since my election to this place, to help get justice for members of the Mine Workers Pension Scheme. You've heard that from my friend from Swansea. And I thank the Prime Minister and all those on the front bench for the leadership that's been shown. I also want to acknowledge Professor Steve Fothergill and Chris Whitwood, particularly for the excellent work they do supporting the Labour group of Coalfield MPs, on which I lead for the West Midlands. 5.7 million people live in Britain's coalfields, 1 in 10 people in England and Scotland, and 1 in 4 people in Wales. But almost half of coalfield communities are in the 30% most deprived communities in the United Kingdom. Yesterday, I had a very helpful discussion with Tash and Washney from the local trust. We talked through the figures in my community in Crossheath, Notts and Silverdale, and where the challenge to tackle injustice and inequality is most serious for us locally, but also those across the country too. And I'd be grateful if the Minister can touch on the Community Wealth Fund and how we can ensure that it's directed to support doubly disadvantaged neighbourhoods. Where will it go and how will it be allocated? Education has such an important role to play here, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was at Sir Thomas Bowery School in Halmer End last week and heard the challenges they face in funding, staff recruitment and retention, and on keeping the smart young people who go through their school working, living and contributing to the community they were raised in. And I'm looking forward to welcoming some of those young people to Parliament later this month. My community has a university, Keele University. How do we ensure that we build that bridge between the funding that universities can attract and the young people who go to study in the communities they live in? We need to see justice, as my friend from Swansea said, for the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme members. And I've told the Prime Minister this directly. The BCSSS has more than 40,000 members who formerly worked in the mining industry, including a number of my constituents in Newcastle-under-Lyme. And I promised that I would fight their corner. So I urge ministers to speed up efforts to transfer the £2.3 billion investment reserve in the BCSSS to the members who earned it, who deserve it and who, as more and more former miners die each year, need it. This is important because a significant number of the BCSSS members were required, as we heard, to transfer to the MPS. So if they hadn't been forced to move, when this new Labour government made the right call on the MPS, those members would have access to their own money. They deserve it, and this government, although only for a few short months, must now get on with it, and I'll do whatever I can to help. As my friend from Chesterfield alluded to, we want real action, not empty words. We want proper commitment, not hollow promises, and we want to see our communities properly invested in and not forgotten. This new government, with a majority of this size, speaks to the opportunity that presents us. We can finally get the settlement we need, the focus my constituents deserve, and the future that my constituents have earned. I'll give way to my friend.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. He's making an excellent opening speech on such an important topic for all of our communities. I'm sure he is as shocked as I am to learn of the severe health inequalities that coalfield communities have, and that average life expectancy is around a year less than the national average and around 3 years less than in the southeast, and for the northeast it's even worse. Does my honourable friend agree that this long-term legacy that these health inequalities is why we need to ensure that coalfield communities are properly supported even in this day?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for her intervention, and I couldn't agree more. 100% correct, and I'm looking forward to working with her to make sure we get the progress we all want to see up and down the country. Madam Deputy Speaker, mindful of your instruction, I want to touch briefly on 4 areas, which I know that many of my colleagues will expand on in their own contributions, and I do want to leave time, believe it or not, for everyone else to have their say too. Firstly, on worklessness. Worklessness. A common assumption is that unemployment, however defined, is no longer a problem. So far as the former coalfields are concerned, this simply isn't true. But it is the nature of the unemployment problem facing communities like ours that's changed. In the 80s and 90s, in the wake of pit closures, it was large numbers of out-of-work people on unemployment-related benefits. These days, as DWP data presented in the 2024 State of the Coalfields report showed, it's now an exceptionally large number of people on out of work are on other benefits. Across former coalfield communities like mine, 16% of all adults of working age are out of work on benefits. The biggest number of those people are out of work on incapacity benefits, just over 400,000 people in former coalfields across the country, accounting for around 1 in 9 of all adults of working age, and that speaks to the point from my friend who's just intervened. This reflects poor health, and I touched on health inequalities this week in the House, but it also reflects hidden unemployment, because in parts of the country where good jobs are more readily available, even many of those with health problems or disabilities are able to secure those jobs. Indeed, estimates from Sheffield Hallam University point to a real level of unemployment in the former coalfields that is double the rate in South East England. That says everything we need to know. A consequence of the shortfall in local job opportunities is a reliance on commuting to neighbouring areas and further afield. Net out commuting from the former coalfields, and that's the balance between flows in each direction, accounts for about 350,000 people. The jobs available in the former coalfields also tend to be less well paid. with 53% of employed residents working in manual jobs compared to a GB average of 46% and just 36% here in the capital. And it's important to note that the average hourly earnings of coalfield residents are around 6% lower than the national average, as we've heard. We have serious work to do here. And my challenge to the front bench is this. We need stronger policies focused on growth. I will give way in 1 second. We need stronger policies focused on growth and growing the local economies in the former coalfields, tackling high levels of economic inactivity. And I give way to my friend from Durham.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way and for securing this really important debate. Would he agree that the example of Nissan, which is in my honourable neighbour's constituency, shows that where there are high-quality manufacturing jobs put into former coalfield areas, in fact, those people from those areas are amongst the most widely respected workforces in the world. Global investors think that they are amongst the best workforce they can get. So the tragedy is that there are not more companies like Nissan situated in former coal mining areas.
Thank you. I'm grateful to my friend from Durham. He's right, they're not just respected, they're brilliant, they're skilled, they're smart, they're hard-working, and they deserve the opportunities that my friend from Chesterfield's noted, that the member for Durham's noted, and that I know that all colleagues on this House want to see too. And those policies on tackling high levels of economic inactivity lead me to the next important part of improving government support for coalfield communities, and that's local growth funding. We all want to see our economy grow, and the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have my support in pushing that agenda. But growth must be driven and shared across all parts of our United Kingdom. As the Government prepares for the spending review, I urge the front bench to ensure at the very least that the present level of spending at a minimum needs to be maintained. The primary purpose of local growth funding needs to be economic development and regeneration, driven by a mix of investment in people, as we've heard from my friend from Durham, in place, in infrastructure and in business support. The investment in our communities should be fairly allocated on the basis of need, not competitive bidding, and there should be full and timely consultation on the allocation formula. Funding needs to be allocated over a longer term than was the case under the previous government. The commitment in the budget to set 5-year capital budget to be extended every 2 years at regular spending reviews is a welcome step. The government's intention to rationalise the number of local growth funds is also welcome, because it makes sense to allocate funding at the sub-regional scale at which most local economies operate. Some will be surprised to hear me say this, but we need less government in some ways, Madam Deputy Speaker. We need a lighter touch in managing this vital funding. And that's because the expertise, knowledge and experience of local people and local leaders, including elected mayors, the Minister will enjoy me saying, for once, should be respected, and they should be given greater discretion within a broader framework set by government.
Will my friend give me one more?
I will give way, but I'm getting the nod already.
Following on from the Honourable Member for Durham, and my honourable friend also mentioned commuting and infrastructure and how important that is to connect people from Durham to the jobs in Washington, at Nissan and the other great companies that have their Rolls-Royce BAE systems. What we need, does he agree with me, that the underinvestment over years in infrastructure, which he's talking about, especially transport infrastructure, means that projects such as the Linsey line that our North East Regional Mayor is also supporting would be so important to create that connectivity we need.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My honourable friend is completely correct. Talking about less government, the Minister knows I have some concerns about local government reorganisation, and I look forward to speaking to him about this in greater detail. But that said, I do call on all local leaders in Staffordshire to engage seriously, respectfully and wisely, because we need, as we've heard from interventions already in this debate, to focus on the livelihoods of the many, not the jobs and the power plays of the elected few. I now turn briefly to the coal industry social welfare organisation CISWO, a national body that should not be confused with local miners' welfare, who are their own independent charities in their own right. Concerns about CISWO have been aired on several occasions by a number of colleagues. I've met the members of the board and the Chief Exec myself, and it would be wrong for those concerns not to be noted in this debate. I urge the leadership at CISWO to consider how they might better support local welfare schemes when they run into difficulty, including looking at the recycling of funds locally when land and property is sold off. Although CISWO CISWO might better engage with local authorities in supporting regeneration initiatives in former mining communities. Lastly, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to talk about the Coalfield Regeneration Trust, which got back to work in got to work in 1999 in response to the recommendations made by the Coalfield Task Force established by the late Lord Prescott. And we all note Lord Prescott was laid to rest last week, and I acknowledge his service to our country. Their focus over the last 25 years has been to support communities living with the consequences of the rapid mine closure programme that took place from the mid-1980s onwards under the government of Mrs Thatcher. They've invested hundreds of millions of pounds, reaching over 2 million people in community projects and activities, improving the health, skills and employment opportunities that we all want to see and have touched on, as well as supporting thousands of vital community assets and organisations. Now, between 1999 and 2015, the CRT received funding from the UK, Scottish and Welsh governments for its work. They continued to receive funding from both the Scottish and Welsh governments, although it's been reduced in recent years, but no longer from the UK government. This had a huge impact on their ability to deliver across England and resulted in a significant reduction in their programmes of support. Where the previous Conservative government failed, can I urge this new Labour government to deliver? And I urge ministers to look at a sustainable, long-term and comprehensive package of funding for the Coalfield Regeneration Trust. Will the Minister arrange for me and my friend from Easington and the Coalfield Regeneration Trust to meet with relevant ministers at the earliest opportunity? Today, I want to honour the proud and rich history of mining in Newcastle-under-Lyme and in North Staffordshire, a region where generations of hard-working men and women carved out a legacy of resilience, determination and community. But I want us to remember the huge potential, the brilliant people who deserve the highest quality public services. They deserve the investment and focus that our big cities get, and they deserve a government that will never walk by on the other side. This debate gives us a chance to reflect on the past, but to invest in the future. As we remember the miners who risk their lives every day, we also acknowledge the role they played in shaping the industrial strength of my region and the nation as a whole. Their sacrifices remind us of the value of hard work, perseverance, and the unyielding spirit of North Staffordshire and our United Kingdom. We have a responsibility to lead where they left off, and we have no time to waste.
The question is, as on the order paper, Ian Lavery.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first of all declare an interest and refer to my declaration of interest, being a miner from the age of 17 until I come to this place. A period of over 30 years, and also my connection with the National Union of Mine Workers. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's absolutely crystal clear from what will develop in this debate this afternoon the absolute need for continuation of support to the coalfield communities. Absolutely crystal clear. Whether it's with regard to the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign, the pardoning of the sacked miners, whether it's the CISWA coalfield, the CISWA organisation, a fantastic charity which needs a complete and utter overhaul, whether it's the MPS, whether it's, again, looking at the BC Triple S scheme, whether it's the general social deprivation and poverty in the communities, or whether it's the Coalfield Regeneration Trust. These issues will be covered in much more detail by my honourable friends. But I want to take the time I have to paint a picture, to take you back to the proud past, because we're very, very proud of our past in the coalfield communities. The communities were built from the wage packets of the miners, were built in. What we've lost is something which we've got to describe today, and what we want back to fulfil that pride in our communities and the people we proudly represent. You know, we were the people who fueled the Industrial Revolution, and the communities being savagely destroyed by a government driven by political ideology. There was little that the collieries didn't touch, and when I left school, I was pretty much full employment, you know. At the school, when the schools opened the gates, the pits opened theirs. Then following the footsteps of our forebears, feeling like we were contributing to the wealth of the nation. And you know, we really were contributing to the wealth of this nation. And many paid the ultimate sacrifice in doing so. And in doing so, we're given the finest apprenticeships you could ever imagine. Qualifications in working underground that could be transferred across the globe, and trained in skills that no piece of paper could ever quantify. You know, I learned from the very best. I my education from the age of 17. Miners with huge intellect, most without a single written qualification, written off as uneducated by people who should actually know better. These were absolute working class geniuses, believe me. It didn't stop at political debate. These men who we looked up to imparted on us many, many, many life skills. They taught us the value of work. I'm talking about miners underground. Taught the younger generation coming through the value of work, the value of contributing to our local communities, and the perils of stepping out of line. The coalfields largely policed themselves. Get into trouble on a night out, and you were in trouble when you went back to work. Employment at the pit gave miners and their families the security of a colliery house, good quality terraced housing stretching the length of the communities, all owned by the coal board, with decent rents kept in good order and the security of a home for miners. These are what the basic things that local communities, coalfield communities, are suffering greatly now because of the huge loss. The communities had a thriving social scene. If you wanted to wet your whistle, there was plenty of places where you could have a pint. The clubs are gone, clublands disappeared, the miners' welfares are disappearing, and we've got to get something back, Madam Deputy Speaker. The communities enjoyed a great whole host of pursuits, whether it be whippet racing, pigeon fancying, leek growing, onion growing, billiards, pigeon racing, jazz bands, brass bands. Absolutely amazing what the miners were able to contribute to this country. That's why we need specific intervention into the government, from the government, into these coalfield communities which are dying on their feet. We should never forget the contribution, often at a great cost, to coalfield communities that deliver to this country. They really need that levelling up that is constantly promised.
Horace.
I'd also like to congratulate my good and honourable friend, the member for Newcastle-under-Lyme, for securing this important debate, which is very much oversubscribed. I wish we had more time on coalfield communities. I also want to thank the Backbench Business Committee. I'd like to thank the Industrial Communities Alliance, the Coalfield Regeneration Trust, and the House of Commons Library for a very useful briefing paper that you produced. I'd also like to thank my fellow coalfield MPs for their sterling work on behalf of their constituents. Madam Deputy Speaker, our mining communities do not only have a proud past, but with the right leadership and investment, we have an exciting future. It's certainly true that after 14 years of Conservative government, coalfield communities have been left grappling with relentless austerity and a rigged levelling up agenda, which in practice meant resources never reached the places in my community that needed them most. Today, I want to talk not only about the challenges our community face, but about the potential within them, the potential to drive economic growth, attract investment and create jobs that can transform lives and revitalise local economies. 30 years after the pit closures, the talent, resilience and ambition of our coalfield communities remains undiminished. This isn't just about righting the wrongs of the past, it's about harnessing that energy in the community to build a stronger, greener and more prosperous economy. I must say something about the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme. To its credit, my government, this Labour government, have already demonstrated their commitment to coalfield communities. For too long, successive governments have denied retired miners and their widows pensions justice. Money that should have provided security in retirement was instead filling the Treasury's coffers. I'll give way on that point.
I'm grateful to him for giving way, and he generously thanked coalfield MPs. But I would like to repay the compliment to him, because I think his leadership on the mine workers pension scheme has been absolutely exemplary. We're all very happy to support him as the chair of the APPG, and I want to on record how important a part he played in that significant commitment this government made.
My honourable friend's very kind and generous, and I do thank him for that. But this isn't about me. This is about the communities that we represent. And I think we have to give credit that at the recent budget, the current Chancellor righted the wrong on miners' pensions, on the MPS, and delivered Labour's manifesto commitment on the Mine Workers Pension Scheme surplus. That decision to transfer the MPS Investment Reserve Fund wasn't just a moral obligation, it resulted in an economic boost. In my constituency, Madam Deputy Speaker, this decision is injecting £5.6 million into the local economy every year through increased pension payments for the 3,755 MPS members, retired miners and widows in East Durham. That is money that's now being spent in our high streets, local shops, cafes, pubs, boosting the economy, creating jobs and supporting growth. However, this pension justice issue is only partially settled. There's a similar issue with the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme, which has 40,000 beneficiaries, former British Coal staff and their widows. And since 1994, the government have taken out £3.1 billion from this scheme without contributing a penny. So I say to the Minister, respectfully, and specifically to the Treasury, with all respect, it's time to release the £2.3 billion BCSS investment reserve so all former mining staff can receive a pension uplift. Time's of the essence. Thousands of retired miners have already died, with 2,000 passing away each year. That's from the BCSS, including many women who are amongst the lowest paid workers in the coal industry, having worked in pit canteens like my mother, administration and auxiliary roles. When we say numbers, they're quite meaningless, perhaps to civil servants and maybe to ministerial advisors. But I know these men and women. Men like Eamon Kavanagh, now in his 80s, who was an absolute stalwart, not just of Merton Colliery, but the Seam Collieries. Bill Waite's a good friend of my late father. And indeed, my dear mother, who's 88 now. Time is of the essence to settle this issue. It's about fairness. It's about pension justice and putting money back into communities that powered an industrial revolution that made Britain great, fueled economic growth, and were the foundations on which our nation's wealth was built. On a positive note, moving from coal to clean energy, we can lead the green industrial revolution. The closure of the coal mines marked the end of an era, but just as we powered the last industrial revolution, it's now time for our communities to lead the next one as we transition to a clean and green economy. Indeed, in East Durham, we've already been laying the foundations for this future. Mine water heating, an innovative, low-carbon energy solution is being developed in Seam and Horden. If properly supported, it could provide sufficient heat for all properties in the UK's coalfield areas, offering a sustainable and affordable alternative to traditional energy. Then there's Powerroll, a startup based on the Jade Enterprise Park that's pioneering lightweight, flexible solar technology that doesn't rely on rare earth metals. This is a British innovation at its finest, ready for reinvestment to scale up production in a gigafactory. With the right support, we can create new green-collar jobs. We've heard about white-collar and blue-collar. Let's have green-collar jobs and position the UK as a global leader in renewable technology.
Jade Botterill.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I begin by thanking the Honourable Member for Newcastle-under-Lyme for securing this important debate today. I'm proud to see so many colleagues speaking so passionately about their communities. It reassures me that despite years of underinvestment from the party opposite, most of whom can't be bothered to show up to the debate today, it's nice to see people on this side of the House who feel the same commitment to rejuvenate their communities today. And importantly, to celebrate the social, economic and cultural contributions of the areas we have grown up in and now have the privilege of representing. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was there when Kenneth, the last deep pit in the UK, closed a week before Christmas back in 2015. I spoke to some of the 450 miners who had been made redundant, whose fathers and grandfathers had worked down the pit. It was clearer to me that day than ever before the devastating, ruthless impact of closures. The mine wasn't just a place of work, but it was the heart of the community. Built around it were schools, sports teams, brass bands, social clubs, places of worship, families, friendships, hope, security and prosperity. And when Kellingley closed, I saw it on the faces of the men and their families, the fear that the death of the industry would take the community and the culture with it. The culture and the industry of his father and his father before him. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, they rejected victimhood. The next day, the miners, the families, their friends, their community marched together and met at the Miners' Welfare Club. For too long, people in post-industrial northern towns were promised nothing but empty slogans. Successive Conservative governments ignored them, neglected them, insulted them, but they refused to be forgotten. Although Kennetley is not in my constituency, there were many mines like it that were closed in similar circumstances and with similar results right across Ossett and Denby Dale. I cannot help imagining the scenes were similar on each occasion. Caphouse Colliery in my constituency closed in 1985. In that refusal to be forgotten, the mine was converted into a museum. Conceived, created and now staffed by ex-miners, run by Lynn Dunnan, who embodies the often forgotten role of women during the strikes. We must remember those who helped heat our nation for generations. And with good old Yorkshire miners taking it down the shaft at the Mining Museum, there isn't a better place to remember our rich industrial history. And yes, that is a plug to go and visit the National Coal Mining Museum in my constituency. It remains a place where we are reminded of our community's contribution to this country. Every time I visit, I'm filled with pride, anger and determination. Pride in my region's national contribution and the spirit of hard work, humour and solidarity still present in the ex-miners who remain there today. Anger at the arrogance and ignorance of the previous governments who decimated our communities without a thought about what would come next. And determination to change this great injustice, to give our community not just what it needs but what it's earned. But we don't need to just preserve the legacy of coalfield communities. We must also fight for the dignity of retired miners who made that proud legacy possible. Other members have spoken eloquently about the action taken to end the historic injustice of mine workers and their pensions, something which former mine workers in my patch raise with me often. I know the Honourable Member for Selby has been fighting for his constituent Tony Rock, whose compensation case in the last few years has been delayed and delayed by the DWP as his health worsens. This sort of case must become a thing of the past, and my Labour colleagues and I will keep fighting until retired members across Yorkshire receive the dignity in retirement they deserve. I know this government shares this feeling and is acting. I was proud to run on a manifesto that made concrete commitment to miners and mining communities. This government approach must and does go further, to revive the communities themselves for generations to come. That's why it's invested in schools and hospitals, roads and rails, high streets and homes. It's restoring pride in our town centres, combating antisocial behaviour and crime. It's financing the green industries of the future, today, to ensure what happened to the mine workers never happens again. It is committed to growing the economy in towns right across our country and not just in London. Madam Deputy Speaker, as people in my area know all too well, strong communities must be nurtured, generation after generation. But often, people in post-industrial northern towns like mine feel like they are ignored and forgotten by the powerful. It is my job in this House to ensure these thoughts and feelings are heard. I am committed to never treating them with the same injustice they experience at the hands of uncaring, short-termist Conservative governments.
Kenneth Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased that we have the opportunity to debate such important matters today, and can I thank my honourable friend, the member for Newcastle-under-Lyme, for securing this time and commend him on his excellent speech. In the villages and towns that make up the wonderful constituency of Airdrie and Shotts, there is a very common theme that consistently arises when we knock on doors, and that is the memory of coal mining, the community spirit and cohesion that existed, and the suffering and devastation felt as a consequence of the cruel Tory policy of rapid deindustrialisation. Airdrie and Shorts, like other constituencies we have heard mentioned today, sat at the centre of an industrial heartland, excuse me, in this case, central Scotland. It was communities such as this where young men and women enter skilled employment and could do so in their own hometown. And in asking government to further support regeneration of coalfield communities in this debate today, we do so in the hope that this becomes a reality, once again using modern educational and employment techniques. The working people of Airdrie and Shorts have been treated as an afterthought for too long. They have been let down by Conservative and SNP governments who acted in self-interest rather than interest of the nation. I am delighted that we now have a government that will ensure the people of Airdrie and Shorts can mark the legacy of its coal mining past, but strengthen, modernise and deliver a more prosperous future. In my family, we remember my late grandfather, Jimmy Stevenson, who worked down the pits for over 40 years. My late father-in-law, Drew McCracken, who worked in mines across central Scotland for 40 years, scrambling and digging in 18-inch seams, and who carried his brother up the mine after he was killed. And my brother-in-law, Derek McCracken, who worked for 10 years in the mines around Plains and Caldercrooks. We owe it to them and the other miners to create a new future. Madam Deputy Speaker, it often goes unnoticed, but the inequality faced within former coalfields is staggering. Whilst there are many means of measuring the scale of challenge facing former coalfields, I found particular interest in a figure provided in the State of the Coalfields 2024 report, which highlights that in terms of employee jobs for working-age individuals, Ayrshire and Lanarkshire, which are analysed together for the purpose of the report, have the joint lowest of 44 employee jobs for every 100 people of working age. Indeed, the areas of Ayrshire and Lanarkshire witness an above-average out-of-work benefit claimant rate and are identified in the report as being areas where extensive deprivation exists. This is the direct consequence of 14 years of Tory government, Madam Deputy Speaker. They have deepened the inequalities that have scarred constituencies like mine for decades. However, looking at Scotland as a whole for a moment, it is a country where health inequality is felt on an unimaginable scale, where the inequality is deep and divisive in equal measure, and where there is no worse time to be poor and in need of healthcare. With 1 in 14 people in Airdrie and Shorts alone in bad or very bad health, the former coalfields that I represent are held back by ill health because of a Scottish Government that has allowed NHS waiting lists to soar, with almost 1 in 6 Scots waiting and waiting. There is no doubt the challenges facing my constituents are significant. The barriers to their social and economic process exist because governments have not undertaken anywhere near enough work to break them down, but I firmly believe in the potential of Airdrie and Shorts and its people. It is a constituency with skilled workers, with talented young people full of potential, and an older generation that remembers its industrial and coal mining past while wanting the best for its future. I must thank the Coalfields Regeneration Trust for the work that they do to raise awareness of the struggles faced in constituencies such as Airdrie and Shorts. And I must too thank this UK Labour government for delivering a budget that sees Scotland receive its largest funding since devolution and a pay rise for working people across my constituency. I look forward to working with the Minister and others to regenerate former coalfields in constituencies like mine, and encourage the Government to work closely with the Coalfields Regeneration Trust, who do excellent work in our communities, as we embark on a plan for change away from the years of social, economic and health barriers blocking the progress of our former coalfield communities. Thank you.
Linsey Farnsworth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First, I'd like to pay tribute to my honourable friend for Newcastle-under-Lyme for securing this important and timely debate. And I'd like to echo his comments in relation to our honourable friend, the member for Easington, for his work championing our coalfield communities, which until this government was elected had been forgotten. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm speaking today as the proud daughter of a former coal miner. On behalf of the coalfield communities in Amber Valley and thousands of former coal industry workers across the country. My dad and the constituents of Amber Valley have a common link, Madam Deputy Speaker, a rich mining heritage. Whether it's my constituents like John Edwards from Heanor, Colin Smith from Langley Mill, or Ian Walker from Ripley, all parts of Amber Valley share this common bond. Our communities were built on the hard work and dedication of our mine workers, engineers, technicians and support staff who powered our nation through challenging times, often at great personal risk. In October, Madam Deputy Speaker, we saw long overdue justice served for the members of the Mine Workers Pension Scheme, when the government agreed to return its £1.5 billion investment reserve. And that decision resulted in a well-deserved 32% increase in their pensions and an average increase of £29 per week for each member. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is already improving the lives of many of the former 772 mine workers in Amber Valley, and it's something that has directly benefited my family too, and I know it means a lot to my dad to get this recognition. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the same cannot be said about the members of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme, BCSSS. The hard work of the engineers, technicians and support staff ensured that men like my dad, who went down the pits every day, returned safely to the surface, and indeed some members of the BCSSS scheme also worked underground. Madam Deputy Speaker, we've done right by the MPS men who went down the pits, but have we truly supported the women who often were paid less than their male counterparts and are an equal part of the coalfield communities? As the Honourable Member for Swansea pointed out, women in the coal industry, the majority of whom are BCSSS members, deserve pension justice too. Madam Deputy Speaker, the parallels between the MPS and the BSSS are obvious. Both schemes were established during the privatisation of British coal in 1994, with the government acting as guarantor. Yet while the MPS members have seen their investment reserve rightly returned, BCSSS members, like my constituents John, Colin and Ian, continue to wait. The trustees of the BCSSS have formally requested the return of the £2.3 billion investment reserve. This request is not only reasonable, but is consistent with the precedent set by the MPS decision. That is not just a matter of financial contribution, it's a matter of justice, fairness, and honouring the contributions of all those who helped build our nation's energy infrastructure. Madam Deputy Speaker, I urge this government to act swiftly and decisively. Let us commit to a full review of the BCSSS surplus sharing agreements and transfer the investment reserve to its rightful owners, the scheme members. This action would provide a significant boost to the pensions of over 40,000 former coal industry staff, enhancing their financial security and quality of life in retirement. And I would urge the government to consider quick action on this matter. Many in receipt of this pension are in their 80s and older. It's heartbreaking that thousands of miners, including colleagues of my dad, didn't live long enough to receive the benefit of the MPS surplus. I know my father wouldn't want his colleagues who kept him safe and supported him to be forgotten, and I would urge the government to consider righting this historic inequality so all members of our coalfield communities have the justice that they deserve.
Josh Newbury.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's an honour to speak in this debate as the Member of Parliament for Cannock Chase, an area deeply proud of its mining heritage, with collieries having been our dominant industry from the mid-19th century right up until the early 1990s. I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend, the Member for Newcastle-under-Lyme, for securing this debate and enabling us to speak on behalf of our coalfield communities. As a fellow Staffordshire MP, I know he's a dedicated advocate for the town and villages he represents. Indeed, he referred to the Dig Lake mining disaster, and in Cannock Chase on the 1st of October, we'll be marking the 95th anniversary of the Grove Colliery disaster in the North Lanes area of Norton Keynes, which claimed the lives of 14 men. Madam Deputy Speaker, my constituents are rightly proud of where they live, and generations often remain in the area for their whole lives, which I believe shows that there's a real sense of community and local identity. However, my constituents also often tell me that we desperately need investment in the bread and butter infrastructure that supports thriving communities, like capacity at GPs, dentists and in primary schools, good quality roads, but also regeneration in our town centres. Regeneration is a vital word in this debate because in all too many coalfield communities, there's still a feeling that decades on, we haven't all recovered from the rapid destruction of the coal mining industry in the 80s and 90s. At the 2019 general election, many of my constituents were tempted by the siren song of levelling up from the then Prime Minister. The promise of big bang regeneration across communities like mine is something that my constituents have been crying out for a very long time. Our main town of Cannock was successful in securing £20 million from the Levelling Up Fund in 2021, but the reality of this fund has been far more complex than even my local council envisaged 4 years ago. First of all, the rigidity of the Levelling Up Fund in awarding funding to one town pits communities against one another and certainly doesn't reflect the more balanced approach to regeneration that councils like mine would take if given the freedom. Second of all, the focus on large, complex and therefore risky projects has meant that fixed budgets coupled with high inflation has forced councils with LUF projects to repeatedly re-evaluate what they can deliver. Now, members will have heard me on several occasions raise the plight of the Prince of Wales Theatre in Cannock and the Museum of Cannock Chase in Hednesford, which are threatened with closure. The museum, based in the buildings of the former Valley Colliery, is a much-loved hub for our proud mining heritage, and our theatre is playing its part in keeping our heritage alive too, for example through the new play The Tunnellers, which tells the story of the heroic men of the tunnelling companies in the First World War, many of whom worked on the Cannock Chase coalfield. A redevelopment of our theatre was to be at the heart of our LUF project, but the effects of inflation have forced the council to scale back the project and it's now set to be closed. Fortunately, a fantastic group of residents have formed a community interest company with a view to taking on the Prince of Wales. I pay tribute to them, and as I stated at a public meeting I organised just last Friday, I will continue to work shoulder to shoulder with them to secure a bright, sustainable future for the theatre and our museum too. I very much hope that our council will use LUF funds to help secure the long-term future of the theatre. The difficulties faced by Cannock's LUF project, I think, underline the flaws of this funding model. That's why I'm encouraged to see this government's commitment to replacing the dog-eat-dog bidding wars with a system based on need and what our communities want to see. Alongside my colleagues, I hope to see coalfield communities benefit from the levels of local growth funding maintained at least their current level, and from long-term funding that doesn't lead to a rapid dash to spend by arbitrary deadlines, and from a genuine empowerment of local councils, which will always know their communities better than Whitehall. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to touch on the Coalfields Regeneration Trust, which has done fantastic work in our communities for 25 years. The CRT was forced by the previous government to become a self-financing charity, and despite the inevitable scaling back in their capacity to invest, their brilliant model of generating income for building new industrial units for small and medium-sized businesses in coalfield communities is enabling them to carry on their fantastic work. The CRT's objectives and investments perfectly align with this government's ambition for economic growth spread right across the country, whilst also bearing down on the barriers which we know all too often affect coalfield communities more than most. Our communities, which once power the nation, are bursting with potential, passionate, hard-working people with a diverse range of skills and a pride in our past, strengthened by hope for the future. I'm proud to be part of a Labour government once again unleashing that potential for the good of the people we all represent.
And there'll have to be a reduction to a 4-minute time limit after the next speaker. Leigh Ingham.
Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable neighbour and, good friend and honourable neighbour, the member for Newcastle-under-Lyme for raising this debate. Stafford also has a proud coalfield history, and many of my constituents were miners who have dedicated their lives to the mining industry, both below and above ground. Today, like many other honourable members, I want to highlight my constituents who are members of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme, the BCSS. At the general election, I was really proud to stand on a platform that recognised the injustice in the mine workers' pension scheme. And following the election, I was delighted that swift action was taken to return the investment reserve to its rightful owners. As the Honourable Member for Wrexham has also mentioned, I do believe the BCSS is worth reviewing. It shares many of the same characteristics as the Mine Workers Pension Scheme and has equally deserving members. I particularly want to highlight the nearly 5,000 women who were in the mining industry, the majority of whom were in the BCSSS. They were often amongst the lowest paid in the mining industry, and their contributions shouldn't be overlooked. They deserve the same financial security and recognition in their later life as their male colleagues. I know the Minister has stated that they will review the BCSSS after the BCSSS scheme after the arrangements with the MPS trustees have been agreed, and I am so appreciative that the Government is open to exploring the scheme. But I have constituents contacting me daily, desperately to ask for clarity on the process going forward. I hope that discussions will soon take place regarding this, but more directly, I'm calling for transparency on timescales so that I can reassure my constituents that this is a priority for our Government.
MacAlister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to all those who've been involved in bringing this debate forward, including my honourable friend. The coastal coalfield of West Cumbria stretches 14 miles from Whitehaven up the coast to Maryport. The coal seams in my constituency were mined for over 420 years before the last mine closed in the 1980s. The miners and collieries of West Cumbria helped to fuel Britain's economy for centuries and sparked numerous innovations. Entire towns and communities in my constituency were built out of the coal, iron and steel industries. But our mining history is also marked by terrible tragedy. Over 1,700 men, women and children are estimated to have been killed while mining coal in Whitehaven, with multiple major disasters, including at Wellington, Hague and William Pitts. These terrible incidents are remembered to this day by members of the Pit Crack West Cumbria group, who organise annual remembrance events and create a community for retired miners. I'd like to put on the record my thanks to Dave Craddock and Joseph Ritson and others who are involved in this group. I'd also like to pay tribute to Patrick Robertson and others working to keep the memory of Workington's mining heritage alive with their campaign for a mining memorial in Workington, which I wholeheartedly support. Despite these tragedies, West Cumbria remembered our mining history proudly, and in an area which has witnessed the loss of not just our mining industry, but also over time the generation of new nuclear power, despite being the site of the world's first civil nuclear power station. That loss is felt profoundly. That loss, when not replaced, does something to the psychology of a community. People yearn for work that provides a sense of shared purpose. I'd gladly give away on that point.
I thank the honourable member for giving away. He's very generous with his time. He speaks very passionately about coal mining in Cumbria and in Whitehaven. Of course, he will be aware that there is a chance in Whitehaven to open a metallurgical coking mine, which will produce coke to produce steel and cement in this country. So will he have a word with his own government and persuade them to open this coal mine?
I'm glad the honourable member intervened, perfectly timed in fact, because it is in these communities where the easy soundbites of populists can take hold. So our response, and I'll answer his question in time, our response must be economic revival in coalfield communities that can generate a renewed sense of purpose and pride. The cynical promise from the last government to my constituents was to reopen a coal mine that they knew would never likely happen. They told my community that the best they could hope for was jobs in a dying industry, jobs that would be tied to exporting a volatile commodity that lacked a domestic market. My job, the government's job, is to put other options on the table. I've produced an industrial plan for West Cumbria, and since the election, I've commissioned and updated a more detailed version of that plan that I will be publishing shortly. It sets out how we might secure new nuclear, upgrade the port of Workington, and fuel new advanced manufacturing and industrial jobs in the area, a plan that would revive and diversify West Cumbria's economy and boost our sense of pride, looking to the future, not the past, for the answers that my community deserve. These plans only stand a chance of success because we have a government committed to an industrial strategy, a government serious about new nuclear power generation, as announcements earlier today indicate, and a government that recognises the vital role of upgrading our ports and has set the National Wealth Fund on a footing to support those initiatives. The government's growth mission, actively backing these kinds of plans, offers an answer to revive our coalfield communities. I look forward to continuing to work with government to deliver this change for my community, and would be keen to invite the Minister, when he responds, to consider an invitation to Cumbria, particularly to West Cumbria, to talk about not only these plans but also the opportunity that the recently announced devolution deal might offer to revive the prospects of jobs and economic opportunity in my community.
Amanda Hack.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the honourable friend from Newcastle-under-Lyme for securing this incredibly important debate. He's a true champion for miners across our country, so thank you. My constituency of North West Leicestershire has a rich mining heritage, with most of the Leicestershire pits falling in my constituency. It fills me with great pride to stand in the chamber today, giving a voice to our coalfield communities. When I look to the colleagues who've joined us in the chamber today, I'm reminded of not just how significant an impact the coal mining industry had, but how much this history unites us. For my constituency, the legacy of coal mining industry is literally written on the map, giving the name to our main urban centre, Coalville. One of the first events I attended as a candidate was the 125-year anniversary of the Whittick colliery mining disaster. The ceremony unveiled a memorial to the 35 miners who died in that disaster, the men and boys who lost their lives in Whittick colliery disaster of 1898. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to pay tribute to the 35 in this House today. William Bradshaw, Josiah Brooks, John Davies, William Gresley, William Moon, William Percival, Lewis Smith, John Tugby, Joseph Wilson, James Wright, Henry Wyatt, James Wyatt, William Belcher, Charles Clamp, William Davis, John Elliott, Thomas Gresley, Joseph King, William Lim, John Platt, Joseph Shaw, John Skellington, James Evans, John Richards, William Bostock, John Moore, Patrick O'Mara, William Timpson, Thomas Benison, Edwards, Benjamin Wildman, Henry Springthorpe, Samuel Stacey, William Stacey, and John Albert Gee, who was just 13 years old, who lost his life after running back into the pit to warn on others of the danger. The Whittick Historical Group have been unwavering in their dedication to ensure this disaster does not go unforgotten, and I'd like to pay tribute to the following members of this group for their tireless work: John Ivor West College, Alan and Michael Wellman, and the late Leslie Hale. To support our coal mining communities, we need to preserve the history of those who powered our country. And whilst we must support our communities to protect our industrial heritage, we have to provide that great path to the future. Most of North West Leicestershire bears the hallmarks of coal mining, with pit wheels dotted far and wide throughout the constituency, with Stevenson, who has one of the last remaining examples of above-ground operational workings of a pit. Whilst now it's just outside my constituency, I also have the open cast mine on the edge of Measham, which closed in 2016. The mine was granted permission on the condition that the contributions went into the Ashby Canal to a community fund would be made. Tapping into that money created by the mine will help develop my coalfield town across my constituency and boost economic support. The National Forest has also been a key driver for transitioning the industrial landscape into beautiful countryside. It is the fact that our community is so poorly served by public transport, though, and it seems that the best way to support my coalfield community is to preserve and restore the Stevenson-built railway line, locally known as Ivanhoe. Opening up the railway line will be the key to ensure greater access to jobs, education, and our future. As a member we've mentioned already, I was so incredibly pleased that the autumn budget overturned the injustice on the mine workers' pension scheme. My constituency alone has delivered justice for over 1,500 families, giving £29 extra a week for them. Our attention now must be drawn to deliver that same justice for BCSS, and that would make a huge difference to my community, with almost 800 people that would benefit from that. No minor, no widow, no coalfield family should feel excluded from the pension money that was already earmarked for them. I know how strong the coal mining community is in my constituency, and protecting our coal mining communities for the future will be key to prosperity.
Jo White.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just want to begin by thanking my honourable friend for Newcastle-under-Lyme for securing this very valuable debate. But I'm here to speak on behalf of my constituents, 750 of them. There is a sense of injustice, confusion and fear. And these are the people who were ignored, missed out when the Chancellor made her announcement last October that mine workers who had paid into the Mine Workers Pension Scheme will be paid out after years of campaigning, and they will receive their share of the reserves that they have built up over decades. In particular, I want to talk about two Bassetlaw residents. Michael Houghton, who worked for over 20 years on the front line as a qualified mechanical engineer, responsible for hundreds of staff and millions of pounds of plant and machinery. And Tony Gibson, whose grandfather and father worked in the Durham coalfield, with him beginning his mining career at Bevercoats, Nottinghamshire, in 1975, winning an award for the best final year apprentice in the Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire areas while still working on the coalface. At the age of 23, the youngest permissible age allowed by law, he was promoted to the staff to become a deputy, a move which put him from the MPS pension scheme into the BCSS scheme. He is 66 in 3 months' time, and he will be at the lower end of the BCSS pension age. He has suffered from 2 cancers, bowel and prostate. Both knees have been replaced due to working on the coalface. As they progressed through their mining careers, they transferred from the MPS scheme to the BCSS scheme. For many, this happened to many unknowingly. The sense of anger and injustice is palpable. They feel ignored and forgotten. Their years of hard work and service devalued. My commitment to Michael and Tony and to the 748 who stand alongside them, that I will do everything I can to right the even greater injustice that they were forgotten, overlooked, while 86,000 retired miners now receive their full pension entitlement. This has impacted on the managerial staff and the overmen who worked at the pit, alongside the women who worked in the canteen and in the office, and of course, their widows and widowers. When I met with local BCSS members, I heard their greatest fear, the ticking clock of time. As each day goes by, members pass on, and their personal fight for justice goes with it. My ask of government is to recognise this sense of urgency and act now to right this unhappy wrong.
Luke Akehurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to my honourable friend, the member for Newcastle-under-Lyme, for securing this important debate. My constituency of North Durham has a very proud mining heritage. In almost every village and town, there are pit wheels or miners' tub monuments. Many community halls and schools proudly house DMA and NUM banners, and hundreds of my constituents proudly attend the Durham Miners' Gala every year. But alongside the celebration and pride, there is also loss and tragedy. Monuments to commemorate tragic incidents in which many lives were lost in the service of mining, the most awful of which in my constituency was the West Stanley pit disaster. Sunday the 16th of February marks the 116th anniversary of the 1909 West Stanley pit disaster. It took the lives of 168 men and boys and was one of the worst coal mining disasters in British history. I know the disaster continues to have profound importance in the local community's collective memory. The school head teacher at North Durham Academy talked about families who go to look at the names of their ancestors on the monument, and I pay tribute to the resilience, courage and spirit shown by the community of Stanley. Other colleagues, other honourable members have spoken about the mine workers' pension scheme in detail. I'm delighted that 630 former miners in North Durham are receiving an uplift in their weekly pension, ensuring fairer payments for years to come. And I welcome the government reviewing the BCSSS. But the investment reserve of the BCSSS must be transferred to its members as soon as possible. This is now a political decision. Changes to the scheme rules can only be made by the government, so I hope the Minister will be able to give an update on what progress has been made with the review of the BCSSS when he winds up the debate. The decline of the coal mining industry from its peak in 1913, when 165,000 men and boys worked in Durham's 304 mines, was long and slow. But as the decline of the industry took place over a long period of time, so did the economic damage that came with the closure of the mines. And one of the most tragic policies to exacerbate the suffering of these communities in County Durham was the concept of Category D villages, places where there was a deliberate decision not to invest in them and to run them down. Quite a few villages in my constituency were condemned in public policy terms in this way, and local people fought for the survival of their communities. My fundamental concern is that even now, so long after the closure of the last mine in Sacriston in my constituency in the 1980s, there's been very little systematic repurposing economically of these areas. Levels of poverty and deprivation are still far too high, and even some of the economic activity that was intended to replace coal mining has in turn been shut, such as the Ever-Ready factory in Tamfield, Leigh. I would like to pay tribute to the CRT for the excellent work they do in communities like mine, supporting jobs and local economic growth. They support 14 grassroots, voluntary community and social enterprise organisations in North Durham. I know they have submitted a proposal to the government for more capital funding to help it expand its vital work over the next 5 years, and I hope the government will respond positively to this. But as I said in my maiden speech, that there's a need for a strategic economic regeneration, a new economic purpose for areas like mine, and that requires the government to think about economic growth in terms of it being focused on the regions that most need high-quality new jobs. And it can do that through investment decisions, through infrastructure decisions, through procurement decisions, and that needs a joined-up approach across the whole of government, and I hope that the Minister will take that into account.
Jo Platt.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and firstly, can I congratulate my honourable friend for Newcastle-under-Lyme for securing this debate, and can I also pay tribute to the member for Easington for all his hard work that he does for our coalfield communities. My now older children, they groan whenever I mention the Industrial Revolution. They've grown up hearing about it because I always thought it was very important for them to understand their place. And I couldn't think of a better place to raise them than the constituency of Leigh and Atherton. It's a place with rich history, rooted in coal mining and textile manufacturing. And it's probably one of the reasons why I, in between being elected, I stayed in Leigh and I regenerated one of our red brick giants, Leigh Spinners Mill, regenerating it to create space for businesses and enterprises to thrive. So if we're talking about regeneration, preserving these historical structures are vital. They form part of our identity and help us maintain a connection to the past. However, there's no denying the impact of decline that lack of industry, loss of industry has had on our towns. We were left with industries that have not been replaced and communities still grappling with the consequences. Our high streets, once bustling, are now burdened with vacant, decaying buildings from absentee landlords. And the road networks are originally designed around our factories and mills, now struggle under the weight of increasing traffic and congestion. But as chair of the Labour MP's group on local growth funding, I work alongside colleagues from across England, Scotland and Wales, and many of whom represent some of the most disadvantaged areas of this country. But we are firmly committed to supporting the government's plans for reforming local growth funding, especially after the failure of the previous government's policy. So the Labour MP's group, in collaboration with the Industrial Communities Alliance, presented an ambition statement outlining key proposals for the upcoming spending review.
And among these proposals is a call for funding allocation formulas that more accurately reflect the true needs of our communities and for greater devolution of power to local leaders. After all, we've already made significant strides with our Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham and the long-awaited bus reforms. So these proposals aren't just relevant to former coalfield areas like mine, they speak to all disadvantaged parts of our nation. So funding must be allocated fairly and based on need, not through a competitive bidding process that disproportionately benefits already affluent areas. Local growth funding must have one clear and overarching focus: economic development, regeneration and connectivity. I am under no illusion that we're going to see a large financial institution rock up in Leigh and create thousands of jobs. That's not going to happen. So how do we focus on how to connect areas to where the growth is happening? And how can we better support the businesses that we already have in our towns? So I'm fully committed to the government's growth strategy, and I'm grateful that we now have a government that is bold in its ambition to get this country working again. This government now has a unique opportunity to correct past injustices, invest in our future and build prosperous new industrial areas.
Elaine Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate my honourable friend for securing this most important debate. First, I need to declare my interest as a former Communities Manager of the Coalfield Regeneration Trust in Scotland. I am a proud daughter of a miner and a canteen worker who worked in the pits from early age, Ellen and John Orr. I am delighted that the support of coalfield communities is on the agenda in this House again. These communities, once thriving hubs of industry, have faced decades of decline and hardship since the rapid closures of the mines in the mid-80s. These are the communities that we live in and we represent. Despite the resilience and determination of the people in these areas, the lack of meaningful action from previous governments have left them struggling to build and prosper. Throughout that time, the Coalfield Regeneration Trust has been a beacon of hope. Over the last 25 years, they have invested hundreds of millions of pounds in community projects. However, funding has significantly diminished in recent years in Scotland and across the country. Reviving our former coalfield sites means reinstating the support that the Conservatives took away and the increasing support that the SNP is cutting yearly. This government rightly highlights the importance of growth, their growth agenda, and the growth needs to be for everyone and everywhere. I urge the government to look at the investment plans from the Coalfield Regeneration Trust. This is about investing to reverse the left-behind legacy in the coalfield communities. One challenge is poor health. People living in coalfield communities still die 1 year earlier than the national average of 3 years earlier than if they lived in the south-east of England. Economic inactivity is also an issue. 600,000 people in the coalfield areas claim disability living allowance or personal independent payments. These figures are significantly higher than the national average. There is a brain drain in the coalfield communities, with many young people moving away to study and never returning. The situation is particularly dire in the areas in my constituency. The numbers sadly speak for themselves. In the coalfield communities of Airdrie and Cannock, there are only 41 jobs per 100 residents of working age, and 1 in 4 people claim out-of-work benefits. 1 in 13 people claim PIP or DLA, and 1 in 3 have no qualifications. 1 in 12 people are in bad or very bad health. But every week I see firsthand the positive impact of the Coalfield Regeneration Trust has in my community. They are delivering and developing after-school care clubs and breakfast clubs in Durham to address child poverty and support families, and are looking to replicate this in a small village called Durham, another coalfield village. Much more needs to be done to support, with the support of the UK Government. I will be working with colleagues to make this case to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to increase funding for projects that focus on our community wealth building model. Unlike previous governments, we need to leave We need to leave a lasting and positive legacy for our coalfield communities. We need to end the left behind legacy once and for all. Thank you.
Toby Perkins.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Mining has long been deeply woven into the practical and cultural fabric of people's lives in Chesterfield, as it has for all mining communities. You need only look out the window of the Labour Club, where I base my constituency office, to be confronted with the former Derbyshire Miners Association offices and the statues of Chesterfield's first two mining MPs. Indeed, until the election of Tony Benn in 1984, every Member of Parliament for Chesterfield in the 20th century had been a former collier. A honourable friend from Blyth and Ashington spoke about the educational role of the National Union of Mine Workers, and it's one of the many legacies that has been lost as coal mining has disappeared. They had a real commitment to making sure that their members were educated to the highest standards. Evidence of mining in Chesterfield and Derbyshire, from the tragic memorials to miners lost in our various tragedies, to still functioning but dwindling miners' welfare clubs and the former offices on Saltergate, serve as a reminder of something from the past, a window into a time when the region was dominated by the pits and the opportunities that they provided. But it's important that this debate also focuses on the future for coal mining areas. Investments like that in Junction 29A, secured by my former colleague Dennis Skinner, now sees more people employed on the old Markham pit site than ever worked underground there. This timely debate reminds us that the former coalfield areas, cruelly put out of use by the industrial vandalism of the Thatcher government, have never been satisfactorily repurposed in any sort of strategic way by future governments. The recent Coalfield Regeneration Trust reflected on the impacts on health, not just of those with an industrial legacy, but also the 1 in 5 people in my constituency who are out of work due to long-term sickness, whilst the same proportion have no formal qualifications. These statistics paint a picture of what can happen when industry retreats from an area and no plan is made for what happens next. And when I heard former Conservative MPs talking about a benefit culture, who was it who created that benefit culture? It was, of course, the Thatcher government putting all of those miners out of work and expecting them to go onto incapacity benefit. But the coalfields are fighting back. I want to, at this point, pay tribute to John Burrows, the former Derbyshire NUM president and leader of Chesterfield Borough Council for 6 years, and his successor, Tricia Gilby, because their success in attracting 25 million in town deal funds from the previous government, and the dedication and success of the Staveley Town Deal Board, of which I've been a proud member for the last 5 years, has brought about some welcome investments that support Staveley to support itself through the regeneration that we need. But I agree with the comments made from other colleagues that what we need is not these occasional little pots of money, but a long-term strategic plan for re-energising the coalfields, because these are very different communities to the cities that the governments tend to find easier to gain investment into. So we desperately need the new government's industrial strategy to peak to the needs of constituents like mine, and to set out a thought-through plan for coalfield communities. I see a real opportunity for coalfields to be at the vanguard of the green revolution. The government's Clean Power by 30 mission alone will unlock £40 billion of investment a year and create thousands of skilled jobs. And there is so much opportunity for the coalfields, who've kept the lights on for this country over the last century, to be at the forefront of doing that again. The people of Chesterfield have a proud history of working hard to keep those lights on, and they can keep that noble tradition going forward in the future.
Rachel Taylor.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable friend for Newcastle-under-Lyme for arranging this debate. As someone who shares an office with the member, I know how important this issue is to him and how frequently he speaks about the need for regeneration in coalfield communities. That's when he's not arguing with my staff about how old he looks. In North Warwickshire and Bedworth, Newdigate, Kersley, Baddesley, Birch Coppice and Dormill collieries provided jobs for many in my community until they closed. I'm proud to have grown up and lived in a coalfield community that retains many reminders of its mining history. For many years I played tennis at the Grove in Atherstone, which was a former miners' welfare club, and I've also walked through the Miners' Welfare Park in Bedworth and taken part in the weekly park run. My grandfather was a miner, and like many other mine workers in the constituency, he lived in Dordon, which started off as just a row of houses until Birch Coppice pit opened. Coal mines brought opportunity to countless people, and many of my constituents worked hard throughout their lives underground in dangerous conditions, and so it was crucial they got the pension they were entitled to. Dealing with the injustice of the mine workers' pension scheme means that 1,043 former mine workers in my constituency now have the pensions they deserve. We must do the same for those members of the BCSSS, like the 93-year-old former miner who called my office today. However, like many other coalfield communities, my constituency is still suffering from deprivation that was intensified by the mines closing. The DWP State of the Coalfields report reveals that there are substantially fewer jobs in former coalfields than in most other parts of the country, and unfortunately this is true in my constituency too. There are only 63 jobs per 100 residents of working age in my constituency. The problems this causes cannot be overstated. 1 in 16 people are in bad or very bad health, 1 in 5 economically inactive due to long-term sickness, and 1 in 4 have no qualifications. By working with local businesses and schools, I'm determined to break this cycle and to ensure that people in my area do have local employment opportunities and leave school with qualifications that allow them to take up those opportunities. Otherwise, my constituency will continue to follow the same pattern that many other coalfield communities face, where employees must leave the constituency for work and our towns and high streets suffer as a result. I'm here today to urge the government to take further action to tackle the disadvantages and worklessness faced by coalfield communities and to ensure that we hold ourselves to our promise to deliver the opportunities that our young people desperately need.
Brian Leishman.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thanks to my honourable friend from Newcastle-under-Lyme for securing this debate, and to many honourable friends on this side of the House for outstanding contributions this afternoon. Clackmannanshire has a proud mining heritage, and like so many other places around the UK, the pit was at the very heart of many local communities. Somewhere that was more than a workplace, a generational employer where comradeship and trust were the things that brave workers who went underground and put themselves in danger in order to keep the country warm and moving relied on. I am proud that the government announced that the entirety of the mine workers' pension scheme would be handed over to ex-coal miners and their families. Hundreds of my constituents will benefit. And the positive noises coming from government ministers regarding the BCSSS are welcome. But Clackmannanshire is like other heartlands that have been deindustrialised. The economic and social consequences of industry closing 40-odd years ago are still being felt today. Our young people face the challenge of finding local employment of the kind that will pay a wage that will allow them to contribute to the economy, to participate in society, and to one day maybe buy a house and raise a family in comfort. Naturally, with this being the case, there has been an exodus of young people, meaning talent and potential leaves local communities. Madam Deputy Speaker, my inbox tells the tale of the social devastation that is commonplace in deindustrialised areas. Addiction issues, health problems, inadequate transport links, high suicide rates, people relying on emergency food parcels to just survive, all point to government failure in tackling deindustrialisation and the inequalities that it produces. And if the 1980s and 90s were the decades that industry and manufacturing left communities like mine, then the 2010s was the period where austerity ruled. Austerity was an assault on the poorest, the most disadvantaged and the most vulnerable in our society. Now we see reductions of opportunity, negative social mobility, low-wage employment, the gig economy, communities across the country ravaged as leisure centres close, an unrelenting attack on the public services that are the very fabric of our communities. Then, of course, we had a pandemic, but the true death toll can never be accurately calculated because inequality has gotten even worse because of COVID. and inequality is a very real killer. Madam Deputy Speaker, yesterday my constituency was yet again the victim of industry leaving. The workers at the Grangemouth refinery were served their redundancy notices. On site, over 400 highly skilled workers will lose their jobs, and when we factor in the wider supply chain, it will be nearly 3,000 job losses. And like the coal industry, a vital energy creator will be lost forever. A different decade, a different government, but nevertheless, strikingly similar social consequences will be the result. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, to finish on a more positive note, with a capital investment of £50 million over 5 years, the Government have the chance to provide the Coalfields Regeneration Trust with the opportunity to help part re-industrialise coalfield communities that would create thousands of jobs. Because our communities need invested in, not forgotten and consigned to history as somewhere that used to have industry. Our communities deserve an awful lot more than that.
Louise Jones.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Last weekend I was out door knocking in Ekington, and one gentleman told me of his frustration with politics and his disbelief that it will ever achieve anything for him. I have to admit that I'm sometimes frustrated with this attitude because I do not believe that the answer is never to try. But I was nonetheless mulling over exactly why he has given up so much. Also last weekend, I went along to an exhibition by women to say what they had done to support the miners during the mining strike, and it was absolutely fascinating talk. It was, like many of my generation who grew up after the strikes, we are aware of them, but like so much working class history, we're never taught about it in schools. So it's therefore a huge privilege to hear Janet and Kate give such a fascinating talk on the huge role that they played, and the sheer strength of the mining community, who fought so hard to support each other during this period, how little they had, but how much they shared. So it's clear that the roots of my constituents' apathy can be found not in just the past 14 years of Conservative-imposed national decline, but really go all the way back to the miners' strikes, where the British government said, we'll take your jobs away, there's nothing you can do about it, get on your bike, we're not interested, you're on your own. So if the government in Westminster does that to you, why would you ever look at them again? The fact is that the closure of these mines removed not just employment, but showed huge contempt for areas like North East Derbyshire and ripped out the heart of social cohesion of communities. We in Labour knew that when we came in, we had to deliver for these communities, and one of the biggest champions was indeed the late John Prescott, and I applaud his work in establishing the Coalfields Task Force and indeed the Coalfield Regeneration Trust, which has been doing excellent work ever since. But despite the general rise in living standards that we delivered, the improvement in the NHS and the huge push for aspiration, we couldn't close the gap between our coalfield communities and other places. And indeed, what work we did achieve was rapidly slashed by the coalition government after that, and then the many Tory governments after that. And I would just like to say, as an aside, how disappointing it is when I see so many of my Labour colleagues, how few representatives we have from the Conservative Party and smaller parties like Reform who profess to care. So my message to my constituent at Ekington and everybody else is that I'm not going to give up, and I'm not going to give up fighting for you and the step change in opportunity so desperately needed in North East Derbyshire. And I know that I have hundreds of colleagues with me in the Labour Party in that fight. In communities like North East Derbyshire, we don't need charity, we just need the tools to build our own future, and we'll just get on and do it. So we need things like infrastructure so we can access jobs, customers, markets and education. That's why I'm campaigning for things like the Staveley bypass to better connect Staveley, Barrow Hill and Massive Moor. That's why I'm campaigning for better buses and more buses so people in Killamarsh can get to work on time when it starts at 8. Remarkably, the first bus is too late for that. That's why I'm campaigning to make better use of our existing rail links so that Dronfield, a town of 20,000, doesn't just have one train an hour to Sheffield. It's a 10-minute train ride and we have one train an hour. It's ridiculous. That's why I'm campaigning to explore bringing light rail back to communities across North East Derbyshire to connect us from Claycross to Killamarsh to places like Chesterfield and Sheffield. And it's about that social infrastructure that we have lost as well. Youth facilities so we can show early on that our governments care about young people. Support to our high streets so they can be the heart of our communities. Crack down on petty crime and antisocial behaviour so that we can feel safe. Better road safety on our rural roads so that we don't see families devastated by loss. And underlying this, the vital work that I know this government has already started on to fix our NHS, improve our schools and grow our economy. So this is what I'm fighting for my constituents in North East Derbyshire. that we as a government give them the tools that they need, and then we will together put in the hard work we need to build that better future. We've done it before, and I know we will do it again.
Michael Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was very pleased to support the honourable member for Newcastle-under-Lyme's application to secure today's debate, and I congratulate him on doing so. My constituency of Worsley and Eccles is home to the proud former coalfield communities of Astley and Moseley Common that I share with my neighbour, the honourable member for Leigh and Atherton. With many other parts of my constituency also historically linked to the mining industry. For generations, the Astley Green and Moseley Common collieries were cornerstones of the local area, providing thousands of jobs, economic stability and a focal point for the community. The local mine workers were quite rightly respected for the tough, dangerous and essential work they did day after day down the pit. I would like to take this opportunity, to pay tribute to the great work carried out by the volunteers who run the Lancashire Mining Museum in my constituency, which I have had the pleasure of visiting on a number of occasions. Occupying the old Astley Green colliery site, the museum illustrates just how central the mining legacy is to the area's identity. We must ensure that the sacrifices made by mine workers and their communities to power this country are never forgotten. The collieries in my constituency were closed over 50 years ago. However, the impact on the local area lingers today. Former coalfield communities still suffer from a shortage of good quality jobs. They have higher levels of deprivation and worse health outcomes. The 2024 State of the Coalfields report showed that on average, hourly earnings in the former coalfields are still 6 to 7% below the GB average. And it found that the overall out-of-work claimant rate was 7 percentage points above that of South East England. It is clear that the coalfields face a shared set of structural issues and challenges. After 14 years of undelivered promises on regional inequality from the party opposite, although then not many of them opposite at the moment, our coalfield communities will now finally benefit from a government that genuinely wants to level them up. Legislation such as the Employment Rights Bill will positively impact our former coalfields, making work pay by delivering the biggest upgrade in workers' rights in a generation. And I welcome the government's decision in the autumn budget regarding the mine workers' pension scheme, a long overdue decision that will see retired miners finally get the money they deserve. However, more can and should be done. The reinstatement of government funds to the Coalfields Regeneration Trust in support of their community wealth building model would provide much needed stimulus to help promote local growth, feeding into this Labour government's mission to secure growth and deliver rising living standards for working people. Madam Deputy Speaker, to support our coalfield communities in the future, we must ensure we don't forget their shared past. There are many lessons to be learnt from their experiences, particularly as we build the green industries of the future. Never again should communities be neglected and abandoned by the government as they were in the 1980s. Adapting industries to the future can take many forms. My constituency is home to the iconic Eccles protector lamp. But despite no longer having mines, we still have protector lamps. They are still produced in my constituency and repurposed for over 25 years. They have carried the Olympic flame. Traditional skills repurposed and put to continuing work. Madam Deputy Speaker, the scars left by pit closures have never fully been addressed. Their damaging legacies continue to reverberate to this day. The need for new and continued support from our government is clear, and this is the least our proud coalfield towns deserve.
Jodie Gosling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I declare my interest in that I'm still a voluntary director of a nursery, which runs out of a venue supported by the Coalfields Generation, which is also a good example of the wider impact that investment in our coalfields can have. Can I thank the honourable member from Newcastle-under-Lyme for securing this important debate and all his hard work driving this issue forward. Nuneaton's first shafts were sunk in the 1850s and the last pit closed, Dorr Mill, in 2016. 160 years of service of men going into the darkness to keep the lights of the nation on. and all of those, the army of people that worked around them to support them and the industry. I know they are delighted by the rapid progress this new government has made resolving the disputes over the miners' pension scheme, and very much look forward to similar progress and updates from the Minister around the BCSS. I am proud to live in a coal village. It's a strong and vibrant community, and my constituents' understanding of the sacrifice that was made by so many is embedded into our town's collective history and consciousness. The pit closures left a vacuum and a legacy of social, economic and health challenges which to this day have an incredible, indelible impact on my constituency. People of Nuneaton earn around £100 less a week than our neighbours and the national average. People in Nuneaton die younger and live less healthy lives, and children in Nuneaton leave school less qualified. The ONS data shows similar trends to other colleagues have referred to, in that children and our young people choose to leave Nuneaton, and the devastating impacts of poverty are still felt by far too many families and children. These challenges are compounded by complex historical infrastructure decline. It's taken years to fight to ensure that the restoration order in Door Mill will be restored, and issues such as shared sewers, drains, land contamination, unadopted roads mar our beautiful villages and estates, eroding the pride and leaving us feeling as if we've been forgotten and unloved. Pat from New Arley has been almost housebound for years, or has to be carried onto the pavements because the unadopted service roads, the Arley backs, by her door are in such a poor state it's dangerous for her wheelchair and scooter to use. She has difficulty attending hospital appointments and seeing friends. These issues have been present for years, and sticking plaster investment and quick wins will not solve them. To rectify the widespread repairs is not a quick fix. They invite antisocial behaviour, drugs, theft, and a relic of forgotten times when we used to have weekly coal deliveries. These abandoned service roles cause many issues and lengthy delays to our utilities too. Fixing water leaks, overhead cables and supplies takes much longer, as the complexity spending days just trying to identify who's actually responsible for the land and to gain access. More support is needed to rebuild complex capital programmes and to work with highways and authorities and adopt and maintain these areas from being forgotten wastelands. They continue to build new estates with similar issues and unadopted roads. We appreciate the investment that we've seen in Nuneaton from the Coalfields Regenerous, who work with projects like Camp Hill to install community cardiac facilities, helping with those long-term issues. And the power of our community and the ability to thrive in the coalfields is dependent on support nationally. Thank you.
Yeah. I now call for the front bench spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats, David Chadwick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am proud to represent several former coal mining communities. Abercraft, Cwmtwch, Gwancagyrwyn, Ystrad-Gynllais, Pontardawe and Rws are just a few of the proud former mining communities that I represent. So I thank the Honourable Member for Newcastle-under-Lyme for putting this topic on the order paper today. Across Wales, nearly 800,000 people, about a third of the population, still live in former coal mining towns and villages. And I am very proud to come from a Welsh mining family. I will never forget my grandfather taking me to see his father's grave in my stake cemetery, who died aged 34 after working up to his waist in ice-cold water for several hours. The men and women of our coalfield communities made huge sacrifices to power this country, and so it's right that we're discussing the future of their communities today. And to cut a long story short, Welsh mining communities have been left behind by successive governments. The legacy of Margaret Thatcher's policies, the closure of our major industry in Wales, and the failure to replace it with anything else has left lasting scars. And it's not hard to see why people in South Wales wonder whether their governments are listening to them. This Parliament is an open goal for the government to repair the damage done by Thatcherism. The party opposite squandered many of its previous 13 years in power, carrying on with a London-centric, banker-friendly form of growth that means younger generations have to leave for the cities like my mum did 30 years ago. And they must not repeat the same mistake today. Because across the former South Wales coalfields, the economic reality is dire. Wages are lower than the national average, job growth is sluggish, and unemployment remains high. In fact, in the South Wales coalfields, there are just 46 jobs for every 100 working-age people. Nearly 800,000 people, a third of Wales's entire population, live in these areas, and that's why they're so important to the Welsh economy. Wales is £10,000 a head poorer than England, and fixing our former coal mining communities is key to fixing the Welsh economy. And coalfield communities deserve to be at the forefront of economic renewal. People in coalfield communities want the government to show them that they matter, and they are desperate for change. With a splintering geopolitical order, we need a strong manufacturing base to keep ourselves safe. And there are many excellent manufacturing companies in my constituency. Recently, one such company came to see me. They make vintage motorcycle parts, but they're currently having big problems exporting those parts to Europe, which is directly affecting their business and employment in my constituency. And that's why it's so important that the government does everything it can to repair our trading relationships with the European Union. And I am concerned that after years of failed promises from the Conservative government to level up, the very idea of levelling up seems to have disappeared from Labour's plans as well. Just last week, the Chancellor announced infrastructure projects in the southeast of England. Meanwhile, the Swansea Valley, that I represent, has been left off the map for the South Wales Metro project. It will be almost the only valley in South Wales not to have a train line. The people of the Swansea Valley deserve to have a railway line again too. It's time we invest it properly in these communities and give them the opportunity to thrive once again. I know from first-hand experience that communities in the coalfields are resilient and industrious. There are unique opportunities opening up to bring back jobs to our area. Take the Global Centre for Rail Excellence in Oncloyne, which straddles my constituency. This technology testing facility, located on the site of a former coal mine, could bring new jobs and manufacturing back to the Swansea Valley, but it needs government energy and money behind it. Public services, especially healthcare, also need urgent attention. The health impacts of mining have left a lasting legacy, and we must ensure that these communities receive the care they need as we work towards a more sustainable future. And Madam Deputy Speaker, while the economic issues facing these communities are vast, many local residents live with a distinct fear. In Wales and across the UK, the Aberfan tragedy in 1966 is seared into the collective memory of our nation. Yet for many communities across South Wales, the risk remains. Coal tips across the UK are still in need of remediation, and the reality is that the risk of tip collapses is increasing due to climate change and more frequent, intense rainfall. In my own constituency, Godra Graig Primary School near Pontedower was forced to close in 2019 due to fears of a landslide. The children are still being taught in temporary cabins in a car park, a completely unacceptable situation. Many communities in my constituency feel similarly abandoned. In Akehurst, residents of Tyne Place have been fighting for years for Neath Port Talbot Council to adopt their road. But it hasn't happened. The road is in such a bad condition that the residents are concerned that they can barely reach their own front doors. So while I was glad to see that Labour allocated £25 million in funding during the autumn budget to help remediate coal tips in Wales, it's a far cry from the over £600 million that the Welsh Government have said will be needed to make these tips safe for future generations. And finally, I want to turn to the issue of miners' pensions. The British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme currently has over 45,000 members across the UK, as many members have mentioned today already, including 4,000 in Wales and 146 in my own constituency. And unlike their former colleagues in the miners' pension scheme, Members of the BCSSS did not have their pensions unfrozen by the government in the budget. For many of these former miners, time is running out. 6 miners in the BCSSS die every day due to health complications related to mining. Many fear that they won't see a resolution to this injustice, and that's why the government must act quickly, because time is not with the miners or with their families. So can the Minister confirm today when the government will give these miners and their families the pensions they worked for? If the UK government wants to address inequality and prompt economic recovery across South Wales, it must start by investing in coalfield communities. Families like mine have suffered the consequences of communities being left behind, and we cannot afford to let this continue for future generations. Our communities in South Wales are strong, resilient and ready to succeed. They just need the opportunity to do so.
Shadow Minister David Simmons.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I add my congratulations to the member for Newcastle-under-Lyme in securing the debate. The House will know that Ruislip, Northern and Pinner is not a coalfields constituency. Our mining tradition is far older. It goes back to the days of chalk, and its legacy today is seen in the impact of sinkholes in the local area. But today's debate is very much focused on the lasting legacy and impact of the era when coal was king. And whilst I don't represent a coalfields constituency, I certainly grew up in one. The old men with the blue scars and the hacking coughs from emphysema or pneumoconiosis, as we now know it to be, were the background to my childhood. And I feel lucky that I had a great-grandfather who, unlike many miners, lived a very, very long life, starting working in the pit at Cumcarn at the age of 12, carrying on to the age of 70, who shared the impact of things like the Universal Colliery disaster in St Kenneth on his life and the community that he lived in and grew up in, the impact of seeing his brother die after being buried in a rockfall. So we know that whilst it created the enormous economic opportunities that have been described by many members, it was also a very harsh, very difficult environment. And as we recognise in the many debates we have about climate change and the transition to net zero today, created a product that, whilst it is valuable and effective at generating energy, is also enormously polluting. Many members have spoken of the importance of recognising in this debate. Of course.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way. We've just had, I think, a very good debate, but it must be a considerable embarrassment to him that not a single member of His Majesty's opposition thought it was worthwhile attending to make a substantive speech. I appreciate he's not a coalfield MP. I appreciate not many of them on his side are. But doesn't he think, really, that if the Conservative Party is getting serious about saying that they're ready to represent the whole country again, we should be hearing from some Conservative MPs in a debate like this?
Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think, as we see in all the debates that we have in this House, that members will attend to represent the interests of the communities and the constituencies that they sit in this House for. And I know the same point, I think, has been made in the past about the lack of members of Parliament from certain parties attending debates on farming and things like that. I think we need to recognise that the central focus of this debate, is on the historical impact and the way that we deal with that legacy. And as the member for Chesterfield has highlighted, there are, to my regret, but it is a political fact, not many Conservative members of Parliament who are dealing with those issues in their constituencies. But I think we'll see them here very active on those issues that do directly impact on their constituencies day to day. I give way.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. Can I just gently say to him that any party that seeks to lead our United Kingdom should be interested in and committed to issues that affect people across the United Kingdom. Irrespective of whether people have particular challenges in their constituencies, there should have been more of your colleagues here.
Shadow Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure the Government will wish to press the point, but I think it's important in summing up this debate, firstly to address some of the history of what's been done in recognition of the impact that the end of the use of coal in British industry and British energy generation has had, but also to look at some of the lessons that we need to draw out of that for what is often termed the just transition, the intended end of oil and gas as a significant player in our energy industries for the future. Now, certainly when I was growing up, was very noticeable that the then Thatcher government's engagement on investment was largely with the EEC. I saw the roads being built and the blue flags appearing all over as the government sought to bring in infrastructure investment to open up those places, including communities like where the coal board house is, where my sister and her husband still live to this day, so that people who had lost the access to the local pit, and I know places like Cwmcarn, that's a valley, are a challenge to access. In just a moment, if I may, that the government at the time recognised that in order to ensure people could access the growing industries of the future where employment opportunities may be created, that infrastructure to create that access was going to be vital. I give way.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. And I must take issue because I served a number of years on Easington District Council. We actually had a twinning with a similar mining area in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. And it was interesting to compare what happened when the Karl Alexander mine near Bassetlaw closed and the local authority and the miners were given 2 years' notice. Grants were made available through the federal, local and national government in order to retrain the miners. New industrial estates were built. What happened when our pits closed in Easington, in Merton, in Southetton, in Horden and Blackhall? We found out on the Friday that the pit was closing on the Monday and thousands of men lost their jobs.
Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, of course, I remember those debates going on. They were a backdrop, certainly to my experience of growing up, as was the miners' strike and the various interventions that occurred. And it seems to me that there is an opportunity, I think I'll just put it this way, to learn lessons from that and to make sure that in this new government's approach and other governments of the future's approach, that we ensure that we take those into account and we handle these situations better. So I give way.
I thank the Shadow Minister for giving way. If we could move forward from the events of the 1980s, in the last Parliament, actually those benches were full of honourable members representing former mining constituencies, including 3 of the constituencies in County Durham. But the reason why those members were not returned at the last general election was a sorry failure of that government to deliver the levelling up that is promised. Can he in any way defend the failure to economically regenerate mining areas that had Conservative MPs for the first time from 2019?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure all of those former members of Parliament, and indeed some of their Labour predecessors, would also be happy to answer for the work that they did, some of which was successful and some of which was not, to bring new jobs, new opportunities, new educational chances. There are many things that we could debate about that have brought benefits to those communities. And it's very striking when we look at the library briefing that was prepared for this debate and we examine the statistics for the impact and the legacy in the different coalfields around the UK, that we do see quite a different picture. There are some of those places where those interventions, based on the statistics, appear to have been effective, because there are few, if any, super output areas listed that remain affected by those issues of poverty and ill health today. And there are other areas that have struggled to move on. And I think we all know and understand why that is in some places, that if you are in an area where the economy has long been based on mining and natural resource, and there is no other direct employment opportunity there, then something different needs to be found. And many members have referred to the impact of that. I touched on infrastructure as one element. I will, with your indulgence, Madam Deputy Speaker.
It's an observation, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I've made as I've listened to the honourable gentleman, that not one single member of his party stood up for the thousands of pensioners that were not given the justice they deserved in the Mine Workers Pension Scheme or the BCSS scheme. His party claims to stand up for pensioners, and yet they did nothing and said nothing for those mining pensioners that deserved a better deal.
Shadow Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think the honourable lady refers to Hansard debates about these matters in the previous Parliament. She will find those points being raised by members from across the House, and rightly so, with a view to moving the debate on to the point where the decisions have been made that have been made today. Now, the Clapham review that took place into the effectiveness of the Coalfields Regeneration Trust was one of the key opportunities, really, to look at the role that local government in particular plays in the regeneration of our coalfields. And clearly, that is a challenge that exists at a number of levels. The member for Brecon, Radnor and Cwmtawi referenced the large numbers of spoil heaps. And I know, I can see those from the garden of my parents' house. It is one of those things where a number of governments and a number of local authorities and governments through local authorities have sought to address that. For example, through planting, through remediation in order to stabilise those spoil tips. But there is clearly still a job to do. And as the years go by and the industries that produce those spoil tips become more historic, the risks that they continue to pose are ones that we know we must ensure are effectively addressed. And so I'll turn, in concluding, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the importance of learning from the work that the Coalfields Regeneration Trust undertook and the points that many members from all parties across this House have made in debates about these issues over many, many years. We know we are about to embark on a process whereby the progress that's been made by the UK as a leading nation for decarbonising our economy since the early 1990s, when we began that really major shift away from coal, which in the 1950s produced most of our energy, and today is contributing to none, as the last coal-fired power station in the UK has just recently closed. We know that the Trades Union Congress passed a motion recently highlighting that they felt there were 30,000 jobs at risk in the oil and gas industry. So when we talk about the just transition, our members opposite, in my view, are justified in raising many of the issues that they raise about the problems that this process has created. We need to ensure that we lay the groundwork. I remember interventions like the EEC butter mountain being distributed during the miners' strike at my primary school. That is not an example of an effective economic intervention to address the needs of people in difficulty. We need to ensure that what is in place, if we are to have a just transition away from fossil fuels in the future, learns lessons from mistakes of the past in respect of coalfields by all governments and incorporates those into effective policy for a better future for all the affected communities.
Minister Jim McMahon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank all members for what I think has been a really thoughtful debate. You really get a sense of the pride of place when members speak about their constituency in the way that they have today. And can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Newcastle-under-Lyme for securing this debate and for the Backbench Committee for agreeing to it. I think the level of interest that's been shown speaks volumes. The fact that we've had 2 time limits introduced evidence of that. And I know from my own experience, growing up and representing a constituency with a fierce and proud industrial past built on the back of coal firing that industry, just how much pride and sense of belonging comes with this. There were jobs, of course they were, but they were more than jobs actually. They were about people and place, and that identity has stayed with generations that have gone since. Now, between 1985 and 1997, the closure of 150 collieries resulted in approximately 250,000 job losses. This wasn't just about employment. These closures meant the loss of vital social facilities that the National Coal Board and the trade unions have provided to those communities. And that's why this government is taking concrete action to support coalfield communities to secure the future prosperity of former mining communities while honouring their remarkable heritage. And we really got a sense of that. The member for Blyth and Ashington, Ossett and Denby, Alou and Grangemouth really spoke about the community and solidarity as well as the heritage. And it's that, I suppose, sense of belonging that we need to respect. And I think quite often, and I hear this strongly going around the country, people don't just feel as though Parliament is a million miles away. People sometimes think the next town is a million miles away. The isolation that people often feel economically, socially, politically, is actually quite profound, and we need to do far more to meet that challenge. This government's defining mission is growth, and we are determined that our coalfield communities are centred to it. That's why we're working in partnership to invest in and empower the nation's coalfields so that they can kickstart growth in their area and increase living standards for working people. We've already announced planning reforms, devolution, our plans to make work pay, and settlements to fix the foundations of local government, and this will all support coalfields to build their future and realise their full potential.
I thank the Minister for giving way. Does he agree with me that economic growth is only meaningful if it takes everyone in every community with it, if they feel the benefits in every town, including those that we are talking about here today?
Minister.
I think he makes a very good point. I can see the member and the member sat next to him, Greater Manchester MPs, we're all very proud of Greater Manchester, and we all see the red dots in the skyline of Manhattan, which we call it very proudly, and the booming city centre that is Manchester. But the truth is, unless you have those social opportunities where people have the confidence and the skills to be able to compete in that new market that is emerging, it can feel a million miles away. And that's really, really important, and we do see that. A lot has been mentioned about the mine workers' pension scheme, and we recognise that for too long our coalfield communities have been an afterthought, which is why this government has reversed the historic injustices by transferring £1.5 billion to mine workers' pensions. Our manifesto also promised that the truth of Airdrie would come to light. Now, the pension scheme was mentioned, including the BCSS, and I can say that the Minister for Trade is taken up with the urgency that members have provided in this House. And it was covered in a lot of detail by members from Bassetlaw, Easington, Amber Valley, from Stafford and Nuneaton, who all spoke very seriously and rightly about the urgency that is required in resolving that. And this government has heard that message loud and clear, and I know that ministers in other places are on with that. Now, the pride history of... very briefly, please.
I'm grateful, and I'm grateful for his reassurance on BCSS. Can I just ask him, before he moves off the issue of funding for growth, a number of honourable members, my honourable friend from Alloa and Grangemouth and from Carrick and Cumnock, raised the issue of fair funding and the Coalfield Regeneration Trust and their model for community wealth building. They are seeking a relatively modest 500 million in capital investment spread over 5 years, which they believe could create 500,000 square feet of new industrial space. Is the Minister minded to look at that favourably?
Minister.
We are absolutely committed to making sure that every part of the country both realises their full potential, because let's be clear, everybody in every part of the country has potential, but it is not met far too often by opportunity. And we will look at any projects, any measures that go in the way that he says in the coalfield to make sure that that is met. And I can certainly take that up and maybe follow up in writing on the particular point on there. Now, the proud history of our coalfield communities must be matched with a proud future. Later last year, we published the English Devolution White Paper, and the bill will follow. And that includes a reform vision for the long-term plan for towns. The autumn budget confirmed that the long-term plan for towns will be retained and reformed as part of our regeneration programme. We are proud that coalfield communities, from Newark-on-Trent to Wrexham through the long-term plan for towns, will receive a package of up to £20 million for funding and support. Furthermore, this government is working with mayors where they are to produce local growth plans across their city regions that sit alongside local coalfield communities, because we recognise that these are vital to our collective economic future. And that regeneration and the long-term investment and the coordination that is needed was referenced by members from Whitehaven and Workington, from Cannock Chase, from North Durham, from Leigh and Atherton, from Cannock and Cannock, from Chesterfield, from North Warwickshire and Bedford, for North West Leicestershire, and for Airdrie and Shotts, because they recognise, of course, you can be proud about the history of a place, and we all are, but the future is important too. And if we don't put the building blocks in place to rebuild industry and pride, then I think we miss a trick. And it was referenced earlier on, actually, that no working class person is waiting for a hand out, but we absolutely deserve a hand up. And we are sick and tired of being told to wait our turn, to behave and stand in line and to know our place and hope that somehow tomorrow it may just come. Because lesson after lesson and generation after generation shows, for all those promises, it never comes. And so we can't have constantly power, wealth and opportunity being hoarded by the centre at the exclusion of our communities who are impacted by it. And that's why devolution is so important. If we don't break away this centralising model of command and control and the hoarding of power and opportunity, we will never make progress on our economy, society or political power in this country. And that's why devolution is so important. And that's why this week we are so proud to be expanding the devolution priority programme, where more mayors will be created with the powers and the tools with local leaders to do what's right for their area, not coming cap in hand to the central government, looking for that wasteful bidding wars that constantly take place. I also want to pay tribute in the way that the member for North East Derbyshire did to the late John Prescott for the work that he did. As a working class voice in politics, taking up that charge and that fight, we all recognise the work that he did. And members in this House have our assurance that we stand with our coalfield communities and the excellent members of Parliament who have spoken today.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.